Dear friends, life is a long series of experiences we all must go through, moments of joy and happiness, but also times of anxiety, worry, and even pain that may seem impossible to overcome. Perhaps each of us has, at least once, asked, why does life contain so much suffering? Why, when we search for peace, does life bring challenges that leave us feeling exhausted and discouraged? In our youth, we may yearn for success, seek love, and hope for a complete life. Yet we come to realize that even the best things eventually fade. Loved ones may leave, health gradually weakens, and fame or wealth cannot bring lasting happiness. The moment we achieve one dream, new desires emerge, leaving us in a cycle of endless discontent. More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha recognized this truth and decided to seek a way to overcome suffering. After years of deep spiritual practice, he attained enlightenment and taught his first doctrine, the Four Noble Truths. These Four Noble Truths form the foundation of Buddhist teachings and are keys to unlocking true peace for all beings. You may think that the Buddha's teachings are deep, complex, and intended only for those on a monastic path. However, the Four Noble Truths are not distant ideals. In our daily lives, we can clearly observe and apply these truths. If we open our hearts to receive and reflect on them, the Four Noble Truths will become a guiding light in dark times. A source of strength to help us face life's challenges and pain. Let Peace and Dharma be your companion on this journey to discovering the Four Noble Truths as we explore the profound meanings of the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path. Each part of this teaching unveils a clear picture of the nature of life, the causes of our pain and confusion, and the way to find inner peace and serenity. First, we will explore the truth of suffering, the first of the Four Noble Truths. This initial step is essential in recognizing and understanding the nature of suffering, the challenges and pains that each of us endures in life. Only when we clearly see the truth of suffering can we start to recognize the paths that lead to true liberation. Dear friends, we all desire a life filled with happiness, but suffering seems to appear at every corner. Have you ever wondered if there is a way to overcome the suffering we constantly face? The Buddha teaches that the first step to overcoming suffering is to recognize and understand its nature. This is the essence of the truth of suffering, the first of the Four Noble Truths. To understand the truth of suffering, we must first recognize that suffering exists in all aspects of life. From birth, growth, aging, and ultimately death, we are constantly confronted with inevitable changes and losses. The truth of suffering helps us look directly at life's nature, showing us that suffering is an inseparable part of the human experience. This suffering includes physical pain from illness or the loss of loved ones, but also mental struggles that are more difficult to name. The Buddha divided suffering into three main types: ordinary suffering, suffering from change, and suffering due to conditioned states. Ordinary suffering is the most evident type. It includes physical pain, such as sickness, accidents, or difficult life circumstances. These are times when we endure clear pain, both physical and mental, leaving us feeling exhausted and weak. Suffering from change arises when we lose things we cherish or are attached to. This is the sadness we feel when witnessing change or decline around us, from relationships and material possessions to our own health. We feel sorrow when friendships drift apart, treasured items break, or when we see youth and vitality gradually fading away. This suffering comes from the truth of impermanence, as everything changes despite our resistance. Suffering due to conditioned states is more subtle but present in every moment of life. This is the inner restlessness, worry, and dissatisfaction in our minds. It's the feeling of never being satisfied, of always wanting more, and never finding contentment in the present. This suffering is the endless cycle of desires and repeated thoughts that keep our minds in a constant state of unrest. When we understand the truth of suffering, we no longer avoid or deny it. Instead, we learn to face it calmly. We are no longer swept away by negative emotions when challenges arise. By recognizing suffering as an integral part of life, we begin to free ourselves from the illusion that life can be completely free of pain. Do you see that understanding the truth of suffering not only helps us accept suffering but also shows us how to face and overcome it? When we understand the true nature of suffering, we no longer fear life's challenges but view them as a necessary part of our journey. And from here, we move into the second truth, the truth of the cause of suffering, to further understand why we are trapped in an endless cycle of pain. Dear friends, if the truth of suffering is the first truth that helps us recognize suffering's constant presence in life, then the truth of the cause of suffering is the key to unlocking the reasons behind it. The Buddha taught that suffering doesn't occur randomly, it arises from deep roots within our minds. So, what are the true sources of suffering, and how can we avoid imprisoning ourselves in endless cycles of pain? The truth of the cause of suffering reveals that the primary source of all suffering comes from three harmful roots in our consciousness: greed, anger, and ignorance. These three, which the Buddha called the three poisons, are the origins of all pain and unease in life. Let's explore each one to see how they give rise to suffering. The first poison is greed, or boundless craving. In life, we are often driven by the desire to have more wealth, more power, more affection, more recognition. When we achieve something, we still crave more, feeling it's never enough. When we fail to obtain what we want, we feel disappointed, sad, and sometimes we even blame ourselves. This is when greed transforms into suffering. Additionally, greed attaches us to impermanent things, and when they disappear, the pain becomes profoundly deep. Next is anger, or hatred. Anger arises when we feel hurt, treated unfairly, or when things don't go as we wish. These negative emotions burn like a smoldering fire, consuming any peace within us and making us bitter and resentful. When we cannot let go of anger, we remain trapped in the suffering we create, unable to find peace and forgiveness. Finally, we have ignorance, or delusion. Ignorance is our inability to see the true nature of life. It makes us believe that everything is fixed, that happiness or sorrow will last forever. This misunderstanding causes us to cling to things that aren't real, to things that inevitably fade over time, and from this attachment, suffering arises. These three poisons, greed, anger, and ignorance, are the chains that bind us within the cycle of suffering. When greed controls us, we never feel satisfied and live in constant anxiety and insecurity. When anger rules, our hearts become cold, devoid of compassion and kindness. And when ignorance clouds our minds, we lose awareness, getting trapped in illusions without recognizing the impermanent nature of all things around us. The Buddha taught that, to free ourselves from suffering, we must recognize and eliminate these poisons from within. We need to understand that suffering does not arise from external factors but from how we respond and cling to meaningless things. Only when we free ourselves from greed, let go of anger, and expand our understanding to see the true nature of delusion, can we put an end to suffering. The truth of the cause of suffering not only explains the origins of our pain but also serves as a reminder for self-reflection. It urges us to see that all suffering originates from illusions and needless desires. From here, we move to the third truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering, to explore how to overcome this suffering and reach a state of true peace and liberation. If the truth of the cause of suffering helps us understand the roots of our pain, then the truth of the cessation of suffering opens the door to liberation, where we are no longer controlled by ambition and turmoil. Dear friends, through the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering, we have recognized suffering's presence in life and the deep-seated reasons for our pain. But is it possible to truly end suffering? To answer this, the Buddha revealed the third truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering. This truth holds the promise of true peace and liberation for those who earnestly seek it. The truth of the cessation of suffering is the Buddha's teaching on achieving a state of freedom from suffering, known as nirvana. Nirvana is not a distant place or some mystical realm, it is a state of inner purity where there are no traces of greed, anger, or ignorance. It is a liberation from the cycles of craving and dissatisfaction, where the mind finds peace and complete freedom. To understand this more clearly, imagine that each time we let go of resentment, abandon a craving, or release an illusion, we move closer to nirvana. This state is not one of denial or emotional numbness, but rather a place of complete clarity and tranquility. In nirvana, the mind is undisturbed by the turbulence of desires or the constant chatter of insecurities and fears. Nirvana is a state accessible to anyone willing to work on inner transformation. The Buddha taught that liberation from suffering doesn't come from running away from life but from changing how we engage with it. When we are no longer attached to fleeting pleasures, when we don't cling to things that fade, we are free from the suffering caused by loss and impermanence. Key aspects of the cessation of suffering. 1. Letting go of desires. To reach nirvana, we must learn to let go of desires that bring about suffering. This means seeing things for what they truly are and not attaching undue significance to them. By loosening our grip on our cravings, we lighten our mental load and make room for inner peace. 2. Releasing anger and resentment. To end suffering, it's crucial to let go of anger and resentment. When we hold on to these emotions, we keep ourselves locked in a cycle of pain and unrest. By releasing anger, we open ourselves to forgiveness and compassion, creating space for tranquility. 3. Gaining insight and awareness. Achieving nirvana also requires us to cultivate wisdom and awareness, to see things as they truly are. Ignorance binds us to suffering because it prevents us from understanding life's impermanent nature. When we see clearly, we can live in harmony with reality instead of fighting against it. The truth of the cessation of suffering is not simply about erasing pain, but about achieving a profound shift in perspective. When we are free from the influence of greed, anger, and ignorance, we no longer experience suffering in the same way. The mind is steady and at peace, even amidst life's challenges. The Buddha assured us that this liberation is achievable, not only for monks or spiritual leaders but for anyone willing to walk the path of transformation. The truth of the cessation of suffering provides us with a vision of peace and freedom, inspiring us to work toward it with clarity and purpose. To attain this state of liberation, however, the Buddha outlined a practical path for us to follow, the truth of the path. This is the fourth and final noble truth, known as the Eightfold Path, which offers a clear set of practices to guide us on the journey toward freedom from suffering. If the truth of the cessation of suffering shows us the destination, the truth of the path provides the steps to reach it. Let us now explore this path in detail. Dear friends, we now understand the nature of suffering through the truth of suffering, we've recognized its deep causes through the truth of the cause of suffering, and we know liberation is possible through the truth of the cessation of suffering. But how do we achieve this liberation? The Buddha provided a practical path that anyone can follow, the truth of the path. This is the Eightfold Path, a step-by-step guide to help us end suffering and attain true peace. The Eightfold Path is not merely a theoretical concept, it is a practical guide for anyone who seeks to live with wisdom and compassion, free from suffering. The path is divided into 8 interconnected practices, which, when developed together, lead us to liberation. Let's delve into each of these steps on the path to understand how they help us move closer to nirvana. 1. Right view, samadhi. This is the foundation of the path, where we develop a correct understanding of life's nature. Right view involves understanding the Four Noble Truths, recognizing the presence of suffering, its causes, and the potential for its cessation. With right view, we see the world clearly and recognize the law of cause and effect, helping us make wise choices. 2. Right thought, Samma Sankappa. Right thought encourages us to cultivate thoughts free from selfishness, anger, and harmful desires. It's the practice of compassion, kindness, and detachment. By directing our minds towards positive intentions, we create an inner environment that is calm and supportive of spiritual growth. 3. Right speech, Samavaka. This is the commitment to truthfulness and kindness in our words. Right speech involves refraining from lying, gossiping, using harsh words, or speaking divisively. By practicing right speech, we build trust and foster harmony in our relationships, creating a life filled with meaningful connections. 4. Right action, Sammakamanta. Right action encourages us to live ethically by avoiding actions that harm others or ourselves. It involves abstaining from violence, theft, and harmful behavior. Right action leads to a life free from guilt and regret, allowing us to live with a sense of integrity and peace. 5. Right livelihood, Samma Ajiva. Right livelihood is about earning a living in a way that is honest and does not cause harm. The Buddha advised that our livelihood should not exploit others or the environment. When we choose work that aligns with our values, we find purpose and satisfaction, and we are not burdened by guilt or unease. 6. Right effort, Samma Vayama. Right effort is the practice of consistently working to cultivate positive qualities and abandon negative habits. It's the determination to grow spiritually, without forcing or straining ourselves. This effort involves gently encouraging ourselves to let go of harmful tendencies and nurturing wholesome qualities like kindness, patience, and joy. 7. Right mindfulness, Samma Sati. Right mindfulness is the practice of staying fully present in each moment, observing our thoughts, feelings, and actions without judgment. By practicing mindfulness, we become aware of our habitual patterns and develop greater control over our minds. This helps us respond to situations with clarity rather than being driven by emotions or impulses. 8. Right concentration, Samma Samadhi. Right concentration is the practice of focusing the mind through meditation, developing deep inner peace and insight. By training our concentration, we achieve a state of mental calm and stability, enabling us to see things clearly. This stable mind is essential for realizing nirvana, as it frees us from the turbulence of desires and distractions. Each aspect of the Eightfold Path supports and strengthens the others, creating a complete framework for living a peaceful, ethical, and meaningful life. This path is not just a means to an end but a way to cultivate inner peace in every moment. Each time we act with right speech, right action, or right livelihood, we are sowing the seeds for a more compassionate and harmonious world. Practicing the Eightfold Path does not mean living in isolation from life's challenges. Rather, it provides us with tools to face these challenges with wisdom and compassion. It allows us to transform each moment into an opportunity for growth and connection. Through the Eightfold Path, we see that true peace is not found by escaping life but by engaging with it mindfully and purposefully. The truth of the path is not only a guide to nirvana but a roadmap for a life of fulfillment and joy in the present moment. Each step brings us closer to liberation, one mindful choice at a time. By practicing the Eightfold Path, we gradually free ourselves from the grip of suffering and create a life filled with wisdom, compassion, and peace. With this journey through the Four Noble Truths, we have explored the Buddha's profound insights on suffering, its causes, the possibility of liberation, and the path that leads us there. These truths act as guiding lights, helping us navigate the challenges of life with resilience, clarity, and love. Let us carry the teachings of the Four Noble Truths into our daily lives. May each truth, from recognizing suffering, understanding its causes, realizing the possibility of its cessation, and walking the path to peace, become a companion, leading us through life's trials with a calm heart and a wise mind. Dear friends, the journey through the Four Noble Truths is an invitation to begin a path of practice, to apply the Buddha's teachings in every moment. We hope each of these noble truths, from the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path, will be your companions on the path to lasting happiness. Remember, liberation is not a distant goal but begins within, in small, mindful changes each day. Peace and Dharma is honored to accompany you on this spiritual journey and will continue to bring content to help you progress on the path of liberation. If you found this video helpful, please hit like and subscribe to stay updated with our future content. Thank you for spending your precious time exploring the Buddha's teachings with us. May peace and happiness fill each moment of your life. See you in our next video.